Hi, welcome to Real Life. Thanks for joining us. My name is Joe, and this is my friend
Stacy.
We have a couple of announcements, and the first one is that on February 16th at noon, we have a business meeting. It's all the stuff about spreadsheets if you'd like to join us for that.
And that's going to take place here, and another event that's taking place here in person is Art After Dark. We are so excited about this event. It's going to feature some amazing music, some eclectic art pieces. So if you show up, bring a friend, invite all the friends. You can go to realife.la/events to find out more information about that. And we are so thankful for you and how generous you are. When you participate in giving with the church by going to realife.la/give, you are part of extraordinary life change happening all the time. So thank you so much for allowing us to host events like Art After Dark, inviting new people in. We are thankful for you. We're going to throw to Pastor Jim, and we'll see you right here after that.
Hey, Real Life Church, it's Pastor Jim. We're here in our series, The Art of Faith, in which we're looking at the deep truths of the scriptures alongside classic works of art that embody those teachings. And today we're going to look at one of the most quoted parts of the Hebrew scriptures alongside one of the most famous painters of the life of Jesus. Hey, let's pray. Jesus, thank you that you are our wisdom. Thank you that you are our truth and our guide. We need to know you more, and we need to hear your voice. So we ask in this moment that you would speak. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Hey, let me read to you one of the most quoted passages in the scriptures from the book of Proverbs, chapter 3, starting at verse 1. This is Solomon writing to his son. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will provide your life many years and bring you peace and prosperity. Solomon is writing with a collection of wise sayings. Proverbs is not arranged in any particular order that we can discern. One scholar said it's like a bunch of little sayings were written down on pieces of paper and put in a box, and then someone tripped and spilled the box all over the place and then put them back together again because they're sort of scattered. But the theme that runs throughout the book of Proverbs is wisdom. And remember, my definition of wisdom is being able to synthesize our experiences of cause and effect so that we can bring about the specific causes we need in order to get the effects that we want. So in other words, if I go and buy roses for my wife and I take them home and I see that it makes her happy, and I think to myself, I'd like to make my wife happy. And so then I go buy roses again and give them to her again. See, I've done something wise. I learned from my experience of cause and effect so that I could repeat it. If I buy my wife roses and I bring them home and it makes her happy, and so then I think, well, she must just like it when I bring things home. So I go out and buy a bathroom scale and bring that home and give it to her. See, that's not wise. That's not learning. Wisdom is the ability to learn to synthesize our experiences of cause and effect so that we can get the effects we want by bringing about the causes that we've learned. And that's the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is all about wisdom and how to gain wisdom and use wisdom. Verse 3, let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and man. Binding them around your neck comes from a very orthodox Jewish interpretation of the scriptures where they would literally write scriptures on little pieces of parchment and put them in like a locket. They'd put them in little bracelets on the wrist. Sometimes they'd even put one around their head so that the scriptures were on their body at all times and they were constantly reminded of them. It's like the old habit of tying a little string around your pinky finger so that you remember something. Every time you see the string, you remember it. Or like a wedding ring that you see and it reminds you of your commitments. The heart of this passage is that we should put love and faith first. And everything that comes after this is guided by love and faith. And so lock that one in your mind. The rest of what we read is a teaching about love. Jesus said the greatest two commandments are love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. And this is the same idea here. And the result of pursuing a life of love, of working from a spirit of love, is that we get good results in this life. And Proverbs and the Hebrew scriptures generally are more interested in promising blessings in this life than in talking about heaven. The call of faith is not to get a ticket to an eternal paradise after death. It is to live life rightly now as a disciple and apprentice of Jesus. And Jesus will even say, if you seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, then everything you need in this life will be added to you as well. And so there's a promise that if we live a life of wisdom, guided by love, that we will receive blessings in this life and then eternal life. Remember, wisdom is the fruit of a mature mind, and love is the fruit of a mature heart. And Proverbs encourages us both to wisdom and to love. Verse 5, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Now, I want to look at a painting by Carl Bloch, one of the most famous painters of the life of Jesus. His work spanned a lifetime, and he, not entirely, but mostly, just portrayed the life of Jesus from the beginning to the end, and actually became fairly successful and well known in his life because his paintings were appreciated for their realism in capturing the biblical story. He was doing in oil painting in his day what in our modern day the TV series The Chosen is doing. It's presenting Jesus in a visual way that makes people go, oh, I bet that's what he was like. And Carl Bloch was doing that in paintings. Carl Bloch lived at the same time as Vincent van Gogh. He was born about 20 years before Van Gogh, but remember, Van Gogh only lived to his late 30s, and Carl Bloch would only live into his 50s, and so their lives overlapped, although they would have never known each other because Van Gogh never sold a painting and never got famous. I don't think Van Gogh ever knew or studied Bloch, to my knowledge. I've been reading Van Gogh's letters to his brother Theo, and he does not mention Bloch in what I've seen so far. They were both majorly influenced by Rembrandt, and Bloch in particular was influenced by Raphael, because Raphael captured biblical scenes in painting in living ways that had never been done before. Bloch in his younger years showed a talent for art. His family wanted him to do something more prestigious than being an artist, and they wanted him to become a Navy captain, but he said he just wanted to draw, and so that's what he did and was very successful at that. So now look at Bloch's painting of the Sermon on the Mount. In it, you see Jesus with an index finger pointed upwards. He's at the highest point in the painting, and all around him are gathered people who are speculating about his work. This would have been painted just after the American Civil War in 1877. And so it's based on Jesus' teachings in Matthew chapter 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount. If you were here with us, we went through the Sermon on the Mount as an entire teaching series within the last year. And in the Sermon on the Mount, you see Jesus call people to give up the kingdoms of this world to pursue the kingdom of heaven. Remember, the Sermon on the Mount begins, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." The center of the Sermon on the Mount is the Lord's Prayer. And the center of the Lord's Prayer is the line, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." It's all about God's kingdom replacing the kingdoms of this world. And then the end of the Sermon on the Mount is about giving up the wealth of this world to pursue the kingdom of heaven instead. So that's the subject matter, the theme that lies behind the painting. That's what Jesus would have been talking about in the Sermon on the Mount. So that's what's in the artist's mind as he paints the painting. Now, there are some symbols in the painting which are fascinating. And if you want to pause and look for them yourself, first you can, because Good artwork historically has been sort of a matter of reading a mystery novel and discerning what the artist is trying to tell you. This is part of the reason I don't love modern art, is the mystery's all gone. It's just, it's all mystery. There's no interpretation. It's just splotches of paint on a canvas and very little interpretation. But historically, in paintings like this, symbols were hidden or buried in the paintings for us to discern. A couple of them you'll notice here. You'll see down in the bottom left-hand corner of the painting, there is a woman who looks distressed and forlorn. And next to her is a basket, and in that basket is an empty water pitcher. Who from the stories of the Gospels do you think this might have been? Who would have had an empty water pitcher? I think this might be the woman at the well who went to fetch water and who had lived a wrecked life, and she encounters Jesus, and Jesus calls her and makes her the first evangelist of the New Testament. I think that might be who that is. She's somebody who gave up on the kingdom of this world to take on life in the teachings of Jesus. To her right, you'll see on the ground a gourd on a stick, and that appears in one place in the Gospels. When Jesus is on the cross, a Roman soldier holds up to him a vinegar, a wine vinegar for him to drink, which was a custom the Romans often did when somebody was dying on the cross as sort of a pain reliever. And that suggests that the man standing there in the bottom right-hand corner might be a Roman centurion. And if you'll remember, in the Gospel of Mark, at the end, the Roman centurion at the foot of the cross is the first person to say, "This one is the Son of God." He's the one who rightly identifies who this is. So you have the Samaritan woman and the Roman centurion at the bottom of the painting. These are outsiders. These aren't Hebrew people. These aren't Jewish people. These are people who have abandoned the kingdoms of this world to come into the kingdom of heaven. Next to the woman in the bottom left-hand corner, you see a little child reaching over to grab a butterfly that's sitting on her back. Now, that's not part of the stories of the gospel, but it should make you think right away there are two references to children in the gospel that might be relevant here. Jesus says, as you listen to my teachings, you must take them with a childlike faith, because only if you receive my teachings with a childlike faith will you enter the kingdom of heaven. And there's another teaching where there are children trying to get to Jesus and the disciples hold them back. And Jesus says, let the little children come to me, because to such of these is the kingdom of heaven. Again, more teachings about the kingdom of heaven, which is the theme of the Sermon on the Mount, and thus the theme of this painting, which would have been on Karl Bloch's mind as he painted it. Okay, so now this is where it gets really fascinating. And you have to know a little bit about the artist's life and art history to appreciate this. Bloch was majorly influenced by a painter named Raphael. And one of Raphael's most famous paintings was a painting called The School of Athens, which is not a painting of Christian themes. In the painting are a gathering of all the ancient Greek philosophers, and you can identify which Greek philosophers are in the painting based on symbols of things that they're holding or things that they're doing. And you can go through the whole painting and identify every Greek philosopher in there. There's 20 or 30 of them by the symbols that are all around them. And Bloch has already suggested to us this, his painting is filled with symbols. If you look at the two paintings, you'll see some immediate similarities. There's a major figure at the center. In the School of Athens, there are two, Plato and Aristotle, and in the Sermon on the Mount, there's Jesus. In the School of Athens, Plato has his index finger extended upwards like this, and in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus is holding exactly the same posture, and both of them are at the highest point in the painting. And around them are crowds. And in both paintings, there's somebody lying on the ground contemplating. There's somebody scratching their chin and contemplating. There are people listening in. It's a similar composition in both cases. And so that should make us think, what is Karl Bloch trying to tell us? Well, in the School of Athens, in the center of the painting, Plato and Aristotle are having a conversation. They're the center of the painting and the focus. Plato's hand is pointed upwards like this, and Aristotle's hand is pointed downward like this. And this tells you something of the philosophical debate that those two ancient Greek philosophers had. Aristotle said, all that we can know in this life comes from this earth. comes from the material world. That's all there is. There's nothing above. The stories of the gods are superstition at best. Aristotle might not have been an atheist, but theology did not shape his philosophy. Everything we know about comes from the world down here. Plato said, no, there are eternal truths that are from above. He called them the forms. There are eternal truths which define everything in this world, and knowledge comes from above, not from below. Aristotle says that no, it comes from below, not from above. And Jesus, in the painting, the Sermon on the Mount, extends his hand upwards like Plato, as though to affirm the message of Plato that Raphael captures in his painting. Truth comes from above. And if you know who Jesus is, God in the flesh, it's as if Karl Bloch is saying, and the pathway to that truth that's from above is sitting right here. It's as though Jesus' extended arm is the ladder up to heaven. If we follow Jesus' teachings, it leads us upwards to the kingdom of heaven. It's as though the heart of the painting is to tell us, trust in this guy with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will set your path straight. He will put you on a pathway to heaven, whether you are one of his Hebrew followers or the Samaritan woman or the Roman centurion. Give up the kingdoms of this world and trust not in your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. And then in Proverbs, Solomon will go on to tell us 2 ways that we are to do that. 2 ways that we are to put God at the heart of all we do. 2 ways that we are to trust in God and not in ourselves. Verse 9, Solomon goes on, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops, and then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. When he says first fruits, Solomon is referring to the Hebrew practice of tithing. And the word tithing means 10%. It was the act of giving the first 10% of all your produce, all your crops, all your flocks as a dedication to the temple. Because the Hebrew people believed that the temple in the center of their community was their identity. And the temple and the priesthood must be maintained. And so all of them took the first 10% of their crops and they went and they gave it at the temple. And Solomon says, if you do that, if you trust God with your first fruits, with your tithe, God will absolutely bless you in this life, and your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will be filled with new wine. Solomon says here what God will say later to the prophet Micah, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, and see if I don't give you more than your barns can hold. See if I don't open the floodgates of heaven, which meant rain, which in a farming community is a blessing. See if I don't open the floodgates of heaven and give you more than your barns can hold. Trust me with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding and your own financial management. Trust me with everything and see what I do. It makes me sad, the number of people who call themselves followers of Jesus and never tithe, who based on all the studies and data give maybe 2 to 3% to the kingdom of heaven as they go about their lives. I'm not fundraising for the church. As I always say when I talk about money, if you think I'm fundraising, you can send your money down the street to some other church. But listen, if you're going to call yourself a follower of Jesus, start tithing. Stop saying that you trust him and then act like you don't. Don't make Proverbs 3, 5 to 7 the bio in your Instagram account and not tithe. Because Solomon says a natural outflowing of belief in the word is life in the word. And God's command to us, God's call to us, is to give him the first fruits of our lives as a sign that we trust him with all of our hearts and with all of our wealth. And we lean not on our own understandings, but we acknowledge him in all our ways, including our spending, and he sets our paths straight. There's a historical figure that you may not have heard of named George Mueller, who lived in the 19th century, and he was a British pastor and evangelist, and he was truly one of the world's great heroes. In his life, he took in over 10,000 orphans 10,024 to be specific, because he kept meticulous records. He opened 117 schools that educated 120,000 children. He never accepted a dollar from the government, and he never went around asking people for money. What he would do is pray and depend on God for everything and live obediently to the teachings of Jesus. There's a story of one of his orphanages where there were 300 kids and they didn't have enough food to serve breakfast to these 300 kids. And so Mueller decided he was going to teach the kids how prayer worked. And he had them all file down to the dining hall and sit at their tables in front of empty plates with their silverware and pray. And as he had the 300 kids there praying, there came a knock at the door. And a local baker showed up and he said, "Last night, God told me that I was supposed to bake enough bread to come down here and feed the orphanage." And as they were bringing the bread in, not long after that, they heard another knock at the door. And the milkman said, "My cart has broken down outside, and in the time it will take to fix the broken wheel, the milk is going to go bad. Would you like to just give it out to all the orphans?" And they all had breakfast that day in the midst of prayer. Mueller died at the age of 91, and there were 2,000 former orphans who attended his funeral. And most of us don't know his story because our species celebrates the wrong things and remembers the wrong stories. This is a story of someone who did exactly what Solomon said. He trusted God with all his heart and leaned not on his own understandings and not on his own wealth. And God provided for him in abundance, not only him, but thousands that he cared for. Solomon's call is just this: trust God with all your heart. Honor him in everything you have and everything you do. And then secondly, Solomon tells us to acknowledge God by accepting his discipline. Verse 11, "My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves. As a father, the son he delights in. Blessed are those who find wisdom, those who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold." And the rest of the chapter is a panegyric about wisdom and how important it is to pursue it and to get it. We can all think of the discipline of a parent or a teacher or a coach or even a pastor that was too harsh or that was unkind or that shamed us instead of building us up. And so we tend not to like discipline or want to accept it. But we have to remember that God is a good and loving and healthy parent like no other. When Solomon tells us to accept the rebuke of God, it's not a parent who's angry with us. It's a parent who longs to restore us and to build us up. I always go back to the story of Joseph in the Bible when I think about God's discipline. Joseph, as a young man, was a little bit full of himself, a little bit haughty. He was his father's favorite son. Of the 12 sons, he was the favorite. And he sort of rubbed it in his brothers' faces. And you know how older brothers can be. They beat him up, and then they threw him in a well, and then they sold him to a caravan that was going down to Egypt. And so Joseph ends up in a foreign country, betrayed by his own family. His brother's probably figuring out then how to cover it up and feeling guilty about it. In Egypt, he gets a job and he begins to make a way for himself, and a woman throws herself at him. And when he rejects her, she accuses him of attacking her, and he's thrown in prison. So now he's at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom. He's in prison in a foreign country, accused of something he didn't do, betrayed by his family. And from that point, God elevates him and lifts him up until he is second to the Pharaoh, the vice president of Egypt. And that story for me is so important because there is no place in which we can get ourselves from which God cannot deliver us to better things than we could have provided for ourselves. Don't resist God's discipline because he is in it for our best. He is not there to shame us. He's not there to hang guilt on our shoulders. He's not there to make us feel bad about ourselves or go around just moping because we've done so wrong. God's discipline is there to make us better. And so if we view ourselves as being in the hands of God instead of the hands of people around us, we realize there's nothing that stops God from promoting us to exactly where he wants us to be. He is a good, healthy, and loving parent like none we've ever had. Want to know how to experience that in your own life? Trust in God with all your heart and lean not on your own understandings. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will set your path straight. It occurs to me that you and I are in the position of being stuck in that debate between Aristotle and Plato in Raphael's painting, with all kinds of voices around us saying, all there is this world down here. All you can know is what we know about the world. Don't be superstitious. Don't be religious. Don't believe in nonsense. Don't put your hopes in fantasies. All we have is this world. And Plato saying, no, there's something more. And a few hundred years later, God walked the earth and confirmed, yes, there is something more. And it's good, and it's strong, and you can trust it. I had a friend who had a little boy who was as rough and tumble as any little boy. And one day they were out on a walk together, and alongside the sidewalk, there was a little retaining wall. And so the little boy did what little boys do, and he jumped up on the retaining wall and started to walk beside his dad until he was almost at eye level with his dad. And he kept walking up the wall while his father walked on the sidewalk. And then they turned the corner, and the wall shot up higher. And instead of being careful and safe, the little boy kept climbing up this tall wall next to this sidewalk. And the father started to get nervous, and he said, hey, you come down right now. And the little boy, without thinking twice, jumped off the wall at his father. His father reached out in a panic to catch him, and they both kind of tumbled to the ground. And the father said to his son, why did you do that? And the little boy looked at him and he said, because you're my dad. Well, God is never caught off guard when we leap into his arms. And God is never knocked to the ground. He's strong enough. And God really wants that kind of dependence and trust on him. He's not calling us to lead reckless lives, because again, Proverbs is in praise of wisdom, but he is calling us to live lives in which we throw ourselves entirely into his arms and his care. This is a deep and important teaching of the scriptures. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understandings. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he will set your path straight. Amen. God bless you. Go be the church.
Thanks, Jim, for that wonderful message. We love art. It's amazing.
And thank you for joining us. We hope that you know that you are being prayed for and cheered for. If we can ever support you in any way, email us, info@reallife.la. Until we see you next time, have a great week.